And once again, we welcome Dr. Tim McKnight and Dr. Mike Jakubowski to the studio. And good to see you guys, as always. And what do we got today? We've talked a little bit about these kind of things before, but repetitive injuries, they're hard to avoid because obviously you're doing something over and over that you need to do.
And they're common. We both see them all the time. I saw somebody yesterday with plantar fasciitis, and that's a painful foot problem, and it was a little unique presentation. But I wanted to first talk about the physiology of this, and then let Dr. Jakubowski talk about the mechanics and how to correct these repetitive things mechanically. So when there's an acute injury, whether you sprain an ankle and tear some ligaments or you cut yourself, the first thing the body does is it restricts blood flow. Everything constricts. The body doesn't want you to bleed internally severely, so there's an initial restriction. Just like when you cut yourself, you look and like, well, it's not even bleeding, and then it starts to bleed, right? It's just a few second delay. Then what the body does is says, okay, there's some injured tissue here. We have to heal this. How do we do that? Well, it's the white blood cells that do that. So the next thing that happens is the blood vessels dilate, and then the white blood cells, they sort of home along the lining of the arteries and the capillaries, and they leave the arteries and they go into the damaged tissue, which is outside of the arteries, and they start to do their healing process. This is all part of the acute inflammatory response. And in that process, when there's torn tissue in particular, like we're going to talk about, the body will try to make collagen again to restore the strength of the tendons and ligaments that are torn or injured. It will try to help more muscle, the muscles that have been torn to regrow. And this is an acute situation that happens over maybe a week or two. After that, it becomes chronic. So when there's chronic injury and chronic inflammation, then we start to see scar tissue, and that changes the mechanics. And if there's scar tissue, you're going to have pain because you've tightened up muscles and ligaments and tendons that are not supposed to be tight. So from my standpoint, the first thing is identify the cause of the problem if I can, and sometimes it's Dr. Jakubowski that does that. But I want to help in the acute inflammatory response. So I may say take some ibuprofen or some Aleve. I'll tell them if it's an ankle sprain, don't put a brace on this. Don't immobilize it because you'll have more swelling and more pain. Just kind of walk on it. I watched the NCAA final last night, and that big center from North Carolina, he had injured his ankle 2 nights ago, and he was still playing on it, playing pretty well till right near the end. So we don't want to immobilize these injuries necessarily. But from my standpoint, the other things that help with acute inflammation, and people may not realize this, it's hormone optimization. Optimal levels of testosterone, of DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone, those are hormones that help with acute inflammatory and the healing process in general. So surgeons know this. Many surgeons know this. A young person will recover quicker than an older person. And one of the reasons is blood flow is better in a younger person. So that's key. But another reason is hormone optimization. So DHEA you can get over the counter. You take a good dose if you're a man, 75 to 100 milligrams. If you're a woman, 10 to 25 milligrams. Especially at night, we know that increases growth hormone production by about 20 or 30%. Growth hormone is a great hormone to help these injuries heal. It's just that it's hard to get, and you have to find a prescriber that does it. I'm not comfortable doing it because it's expensive, and there's a lot of FDA oversight in this, so we have to be really careful. But you can do the next best thing, which is DHEA. You can optimize testosterone. We've talked before about the inflammatory role of sugars and carbohydrates. They will make things more inflamed. Alcohol will cause more inflammation. So those are sort of the common dietary things that we can do, and then it's hormone optimization. And then I'm trying to manage pain, and from that point, it's, go see Dr. Jakubowski. Just like this guy yesterday who says, he's at work a lot on his feet. He's a tall guy. He's a big guy, and his left foot was starting to hurt underneath the heel. And when he sat down and then got up, it felt like a knife was sticking in the bottom of his foot. Didn't happen in the morning, which is interesting, but it happened after a couple hours on the job in the daytime. And so the fascia, the tendons that were injured, were tightening up, and now he's stretching them against a tension that doesn't want to be stretched. So I said, Dr. J, he's the man to see for this now, So that's what I do. And then fortunately we have a guy like Dr. Jakubowski here in the area that's very unique in what he does. I don't know of anybody else that does what he does, and it works really, really well. I just wish everybody understood how valuable this can be.
Yeah, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have to recover from the scars, right?
Right. So what we see, Dr. McKnight's talking about, something called plantar fasciitis, and some people might notice that, and we see this a lot. They sit, they're laying in bed, and they go to get up in the morning, and they're having trouble walking to the bathroom because the bottom of their feet or just one foot hurts them really bad. It feels like they're stepping on glass. And that's just that bottom muscle when we wear improper shoes. And a lot of things, what we see is people wear old shoes. They buy a pair of shoes, they wear out the heels on them, and you can see the wear patterns on your heels if you look at the back of the soles of them. And what we see is people don't like to spend money on that stuff. I know I don't like to spend money on shoes. And you're like, God, these are fine, I'll work through it. But when you're on your feet all day, when you work all day, you need good support for your shoes. So when you're seeing these type of things happen where you go to get up and you're like, boy, I can barely walk, my heel's killing me, what can I do? We have to look, because what we notice is as we get older and arthritis forms, the integrity of our joints, we lose some of those things. And we have the arch of our foot, and we might lose some of the arch of our foot. And that puts more stress on the muscle, not only standing. And then we wear improper footwear, and then that puts stress on it. So that's the stress on the muscle that builds the scar tissue. The muscle starts to tighten up, and it pulls so hard on the bone, the tendons do, and the tendon is attached right into the bone of the heel, that what we'll do is we'll see so much stress and inflammation there. So the body's reaction to that is, oh boy, I got this tendon that has a lot of inflammation, has a lot of stress on it. I just don't want it to snap and break off. I'm going to throw calcium at it and calcify it. So people say, boy, they go to the podiatrist, they x-ray their foot, and they're like, boy, I have a bone spur there growing off of my, and basically what that is the tendons calcifying, the body's reaction to concrete that stress there so it doesn't bust. So my goal is to kind of reduce that stress on the muscle. It might be something simple as, okay, let's look at your mechanics. Is it your hips doing it? Are you wearing proper footwear? Do you need something called an orthotic? Orthotics work great for people with plantar fasciitis. I also see this in athletes too, is if an athlete has shin splints and they're running track, and we're about to hit the major season of track, it's the stress. It might be their gear they're wearing, but a lot of times is it just do they what we call supinate or pronate when they walk, where they have flat feet, and an orthotic, I would say 75 to 90% of the time would cure shin splints for an athlete.
That generally develops from the foot and the arch, right?
Yes. Yeah, so if it's just mechanical, so your body puts the stresses in different spots, and then you start to notice things develop. So an orthotic for shin splints, an orthotic for plantar fasciitis do great things. Now, there's two ways you can handle that. You can get a custom fit orthotic, which we do in the office, that some people need. But also, there's just the orthotics you can find at the stores. There's a machine, I think they have one at Walmart, where you just stand on it, and it kind of says, hey, this is a generic orthotic, but hey, try this. And it's a less expensive way to kind of combat these things, especially in the athlete that we see. But when we see these type of injuries like an ankle sprain or plantar fasciitis, the way medicine used to work is like, hey, let's cast it, let's immobilize it, and don't use it, and let it heal. Well, we even know that with back pain. That's what we used to do for back pain. And now we know that's the worst thing you could do for somebody. Even after some surgeries, they have people, back surgeries, knee surgeries, they have them up and moving the day they had the surgery or the next day. So when they say, oh, I sprained my ankle, let's brace it, let's put it in a boot and don't don't use it for 3 weeks, what we lose is blood flow to the area, like Dr. McKnight said, but we also lose something really important called proprioception, or the way our nerves work to the area. And what we find is when we're not using something, we lose it, right? Mm-hmm. So we lose the proprioception, or the way the nerves kind of tell our joint to stay stable when we're using it. So when you mobilize it, then you go to get back on it, and you're like, okay, it feels better. I'm going to go play basketball now. I just immobilized it for 3 weeks, but I want to run up and down the court. And then we have a new injury because of it, because your nerves are inactive, your muscles are weaker. So those are some of the worst things you can do. So you got to stay active on it, exercise it, and stimulate all those things so you don't have a re-injury.
So if I see a cast, am I to assume that someone has a broken bone now at this point?
That's the only time you should cast, in my opinion, an injury like that, because that does have to heal. It needs to be immobilized to heal. And I love the idea that chronic inflammation leads to calcium deposition and more bone formation. We know that's what happens in the neck when you're hunched over for 30 years. Now you're frozen that way. But it also happens in the arteries. That's calcium in the lining of the arteries is hardening of the arteries, and we demonstrate those arteries in Fit for Life. I saw somebody yesterday who was having terrible knee pain, an older lady, and she's sitting and she's not really doing that much. So I was trying to get blood flow into that joint and get the joint to move, break up those adhesions that are forming when the knee is at a 90-degree angle. That's not the angle the knee should be sitting at. It should be moving constantly. So I grabbed her ankle and I grabbed the underside of her knee with my other hand and pulled on her leg, and then gently bent the knee, straightened it out and bent it, and tried to increase the range of motion every time I would bend it and extend it and put traction on it in an attempt to reduce the inflammation and help her with her pain. And that's a pretty simple thing you can do for knee pain, and it really works pretty well. If you've got a spouse or a friend that's willing to do that, that can be really helpful. It doesn't fix the problem, but it helps with the chronic inflammation. So again, fixing the mechanics is absolutely crucial. And then we've always talked about, what is the root cause of this? Why was it this gentleman's right foot and not both feet? Mm-hmm. Does he have a leg length discrepancy? Does he have a hip problem? He's putting more pressure on that leg for a reason, or that foot is injured more than the other one for a reason. And that's our job, and particularly Dr. Jakubowski, who's really good with the mechanics of this. Something else that I learned was really a really cool experiment for me. My daughter was in Dr. Jakubowski's gym, and I said, hey, Elizabeth, get on the treadmill and run, and I'm going to record you. And I recorded her from every angle, and then I did it in slow motion. It was really, really instructive for her to see how her foot was landing and how it was sometimes rolling a little bit. And it was an immediate idea that you need an orthotic to keep that foot from rolling, because if you put too many miles on running like that, you're going to have plantar fasciitis. You
got to improve your gait or you'll be injured.
Exactly. So that's something else that's I think a really neat pointer that people can look at. And when we're talking about weightlifting, same thing. A lot of people just walk in the gym and start lifting weights and have no idea what they're doing mechanically to a joint, and they'll injure themselves, and then in a couple of weeks they're done because their shoulder hurts or they've hurt their back. So again, understanding the mechanics and trying to restore it to the proper range of motion and function is really, really crucial.
Very good.
Yeah, I think the key is just don't immobilize. If it hurts, just say, I'm just going to sit here. I'm not going to use it, because when I use it, it hurts. We got to find out the pattern of why that's happening, because the long-term effects of just immobilizing joints or just not using them because they're in pain just cause a lot more problems in the future. Yeah,
little pain now is better than a lot of pain later.
Exactly.
Hey, I'm like that old Fram oil filter guy, I think. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate that. And I think that applies to just about everybody at some time or another. So we appreciate it.